This is Jordan Edwards, and this is the Business Jiu-Jitsu Podcast.
Good afternoon, Riccardo Ammendolia. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on this.
Yeah, welcome to the Business Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. Really excited to be talking to you today. You are a voice of our sport, someone who's making incredible content, podcaster, commentator, working for Flow Grappling and Flow Sports, which is, really helping our industry and our little niche emerge and grow. And so there's no better person to talk to on the topic of the business of jiu-jitsu, even though this book that I'm writing is not about the business of jiu-jitsu, but it's a component of it. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe you could just give us a little background on yourself, where you came from, how you got into jiu-jitsu.
Sure. I'm about 41 years old, first and foremost. I'm based out of Hamilton, Ontario, which is just outside of Toronto. I'm born and raised here and in Canada. And, I got into jiu-jitsu early teens. My father was, used to teach karate and at the local university. And I've always kind of had the, inclination to want to do martial arts because I saw my father, pictures of my father doing karate and teaching karate. So I had the martial arts bug my entire life. I got into it in my late teens, saw the UFC, discovered, jiu-jitsu was the real deal. And, just from there, I've been kind of traveling the world, training, doing different, content media, as you mentioned. And I've sort of become this person that wants to learn jiu-jitsu, but I've also felt that it was my personal vocation to try to help jiu-jitsu in the professional market, which is, tournaments, pro events, media content, helping athletes and so forth. So that's sort of been my secondary, passion with jiu-jitsu, as well as learning the technique, is kind of giving back or contributing to whatever I could, and trying to help it grow. But I've been doing that for quite some time. Started getting into commentating around 2009 for the Fight Network here in Canada, which is like a 24-hour television network. So I did that for a few years and, commentated a lot of the pro events like Copa Podio, ADCC, Abu Dhabi World Pro, everywhere from Brazil, Abu Dhabi, United States. And like you mentioned, now I contribute pretty frequently for Flow Grappling. Been working with them since about 2015, commentating, doing my own podcast and some other stuff. So I'm just trying to, get my hands in everywhere in jiu-jitsu and, just help it. Cause it's, it helped me with a lot of things. I met my wife at jiu-jitsu, a lot of my best friends, some of my, best experiences. And I just feel like, it's given so much to me. I have to do my part in this life to kind of give back to it and try to give it its best chance at, becoming, even bigger than it is. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's great. Are you working full-time in the jiu-jitsu industry?
I wouldn't say I'm working full-time in the jiu-jitsu industry, but I'm, semi full-time doing stuff, content. Like I said, I do stuff for Flow pretty frequently, like, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. I'm, either creating content or hosting a show or meeting with them. And then I like to do my own content on my own YouTube channel. So I'm not 24/7, 365, 24 hours a day yet, but I'm pretty much living, breathing, thinking jiu-jitsu, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, from the day I wake up to just before I go to bed. So,
wow.
I'm not getting the monetary value of all that yet, but the sweat equity I'm putting in is there for sure.
That's great. What are some of the other things you do to earn a living?
Right now teaching jiu-jitsu, well, due to the current pandemic, not as much, but hopefully we getting, back to that soon. Teaching jiu-jitsu, working at Flow. I was doing some work at a group home, kind of part-time. So trying to juggle a few hats and, father of 3. So I got a lot of, I got my hands full. If I would have known the schedule that I would have had today in my life, when I was 19, I would never have believed it, having to like do all those things and manage kids and, 3 different lives and my wife and myself and jiu-jitsu and personalities. It's insane, but I love every minute of it.
That's great. Yeah, I just had my second kid, and no matter what anybody tells you, there's no preparation for getting in it. No. I've often equated it to watching martial arts, like watching the UFC and then stepping in the ring. It's
100%.
like you might think you know something just by watching it or hearing about it, but you don't know until you've got throw up all over you at 4:00 in the morning.
If you you can watch the books, or you can read the books, you can watch the YouTube videos, you can get your parents' advice, but it's just like martial arts, just like jiu-jitsu. You can't learn it from not doing it. You have to put yourself into it, and experience is our best, teacher in life. I think so. Yeah, I agree.
So did I read correctly that you were the Mendez brothers' first black belt?
Yeah. In 2010, the academy that I'm at, we affiliated with the Mendez brothers, and, we brought them to Canada. They used to come for like weeks on end. Actually, funny story, they almost relocated to Canada. That was before deciding to go to Newport Beach. They were coming so much that they actually considered it, It didn't end up happening. Good for them. They went to a little bit nicer climate and area, but through that journey, I got to know them pretty well. And I was already a brown belt through Romero Jacare. I got my belts through him, but I had left the academy that I was training at, which was affiliated with the Lions. And then 2 years after hooking up with the Mendez brothers and meeting them and training with them and stuff, I got my black belt, and I was their first black belt, which is it's pretty awesome. And it's, it was also a big target on your back. Anywhere you go traveling, you're like, people are looking at you, you're like, oh, you're a black belt. Where'd you get your black belt from? You're like, Hafa and Guy Mendez, like, let's roll. They're like, you see, they're telling their buddies, like, let's see how good his Berimbolo is. Let's see what we can, you know what I mean? So, but it's cool, you learn that way, and it keeps you sharp. And it's pretty cool because not just the jiu-jitsu, Mendez brothers I think it relates to your podcast, they're very business savvy. They're hustlers. They're hard workers. They're very brand oriented. They're very strong on their vision. They stuck to it, and they were innovators, and not just in jiu-jitsu, but in the business of jiu-jitsu. So, again, throws back to our conversation is here. And I'm pretty honored because I can pretty much ask them, anything, about business and about branding, about marketing and stuff like that. And they're open books. They've been really cool that way, and, giving me feedback, good or bad, so it's been truly a blessing to be working with them and be affiliated with them in all aspects. Yeah.
What they did in their branding was world-class, in my opinion. The aesthetic of their academy, the gear, the art of jiu-jitsu, the partnership with Ruka and Show Your Roll, just how clean in the aesthetic of their academy. It's almost like they took the Japanese aesthetic and they mixed it with a little of the Brazilian, and they added the LA flavor into it.
Yep.
And when they started putting all that content, I was like, I want to train jiu-jitsu there. Yeah. I want my house to look like that.
Yeah, exactly. And, the one thing that you and I kind of mentioned, and I said this on a tweet earlier about building your brand. And I think that they paved the way for a lot of athletes today to really look at. And what I mean is, they were with Atos Jiu-Jitsu for a long time. And even during that time, they're obviously loyal to the team, but they branded themselves, Mendez brothers constantly. It was Mendez brothers. Then it was AOJ. So, a lot of athletes are out there now, and they think social media is about, getting likes just for popularity contests, or, to pick up chicks or something. But it's not about that. It's about growing your brand, growing your identity, being able to communicate with your fan base and giving them what they want out of you through social media to a degree where, it makes you more valuable. It gives you more of a negotiation when you want to, get sponsors and so forth. And they just did it right. You know what I mean? They did it right. And I think a lot of athletes need to start, not that they have to copy their techniques or copy their style or, sit there with the AOJ poses and stuff, but like just focus on what they did right. And, how did other athletes in other sports do the same thing, or what did they do that was different than a lot of these other athletes? So they're great industry leaders, in the technical jiu-jitsu aspect, but also in the business aspect as well.
Yeah. Well, I see behind you, you have Robert Drysdale's book. I have it right on my desk over here. He's a recent guest on our podcast. And if there was one book that tapped into what you're talking about right now, it would be Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Did you ever read Shoe Dog?
No, I have not. No.
It's the story of Nike.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
And they talk about the early days of Nike, how it was just a sporting goods store called Blue Ribbon Sports, and in the early days, how he got the partnerships with Michael Jordan, and all these Tiger Woods, and how they rode those partnerships and those brand connections all the way to where Nike is today, one of the most valuable brands in the world. And what social media has allowed these athletes to do is create their own brands within niches. So one of the things that you put up on social media, I think it was today, by the way, today's June 11th, is can jiu-jitsu transcend into the mainstream? Will it transcend into the mainstream? What can be done to transcend into the mainstream? So my question to you is, do you think that it has mainstream potential? And what do you think we need to do to get there?
So first and foremost, yes. Secondly, we are making the right steps. 10 years ago, I would have said, I don't know, but I think we are in the right path, and it's for a number of different reasons. Now, immediately when I say this, people might say, well, you work for Flow Grappling, you're going to be biased. I'm not even talking about that. That'll come later. I'm talking about when you look at where we are now in the world compared to 10 years ago, where you see articles in the news about police officers having mandatory jiu-jitsu training, when you have countries like Abu Dhabi making it mandatory that children must take jiu-jitsu as a course in schools. We didn't have this 10 years ago. This was not even a thing 10 years ago. So, I mean, those are kind of isolated examples, but those are the steps that we need to see. Mainstream sports, somebody brought up a good point in my post, was mainstream sports are practiced at schools. Well, if we're making the first step of having jiu-jitsu in more schools around the world, that's a step where we need to go, because now, maybe we're not going to have black belts, running the streets, but if people kind of understand the concept of what fighting and grappling is, when they see it or know that there's a big grappling event, it's that much more appealing. It's not that alien to them. And so, we look at people doing jiu-jitsu and then the non-practitioners. We have the greatest media outlet out there, not even Flow Grappling, but UFC, promoting jiu-jitsu. And it's just growing and growing and growing. I saw like a UFC commentator, obviously probably doesn't know anything about jiu-jitsu, and they were showing a guillotine choke and just the basics of it. So the educational process is growing. So that's the first thing. When it comes to the sport, I think obviously Flow is doing an amazing job investing so much money, time, and effort into growing the sport and the eyeballs. I always use the example of, you look at Marvin Castell, black belt from Eddie Bravo, and a few years ago he hit this Imanari roll in a fight to win. Now that video, I think on Facebook, got like 20 million views or something like that. So again, it's stuff like that's going to help just kind of getting more eyeballs. So Flow is doing a great job working promotions. Now they have their own promotion. And they're working with, got guys like Joe Rogan and John Danner talking about it. So it's just like all of the right steps are going forward. Now, the part that we need, I think, mostly to work on is the finished product that we deliver. I'll give you an example. My own personal example. I remember showing my father karate black belt. He doesn't really like jiu-jitsu. He still thinks, Hoist is a bum and all this. I'm just joking. But, he still... he thinks an old school karate guy will go in there and kill these guys, whatever. But anyways, so I showed him a hype trailer once for a tournament, won't say the name, and he was like, wow, this looks awesome, because he's seeing, beautiful music and, these guys doing throws and discs and sweeps and submissions. He's like, man, I want to watch that. Puts it on. 5 minutes later, he's like, I'm going to go do some gardening. Old Italian guy. He's just like, we lost his attention, So the finished product is what we need to improve a little bit. That needs a little more work, And I think events like Who's Number One, a lot of these other pro events are taking the necessary steps. They're designing rules that are more exciting, more user friendly. Because imagine trying to explain, the advantages and penalties and point system to somebody that's a non-practitioner. I have been there, and I'll give you a funny example. Another funny example is a friend of mine used to own Five Grappling, and he actually brought the owner of the Red Bull Media House to one of the biggest tournaments in the Worlds, and we're there front row, first row. We're watching Buchecha and Keenan. This is a few years back, and everyone's going nuts. And he's looking at it, and he's like, "This is cool." He's like, "Everyone's going nuts. The energy's great here. These guys look like they're doing something." He's like, "But who are they? What division is it? What's going on here? Why is this guy untucking his uniform?" Like, so it's a little confusing still. So, we need to bump up the education of what the sport is and what jiu-jitsu is to the masses, to the non-practitioners, but then polish up the product that we give. Now, when you look at jiu-jitsu and grappling, there's essentially two elements. There's amateur and then there's pro. I'm more talking about the pro. The amateur is doing all the right things. They're that's not what I'm talking about here. But we've also in our culture have sort of grown with this idea that the amateur is pro, so it's a little confusing sometimes, But I think the professionals, the professional events are making the right steps. They're looking to try to make things more exciting. They're trying to implement new rules or allowing more more legal techniques. And then the media that's come out with stuff with Flow and ADCC, this was non-existent 10 years ago. So it's we're everything's there. We got the media, we got the right players involved, so we're taking the right steps. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, I would have been like, I don't know, you know what I mean? We could go to UFC Fight Expo with Grappler's Quest and hope for the best, but that was about it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought exercise to see, is jiu-jitsu going to break into the mainstream in the way that the UFC seems to have broken into the mainstream with crossover stars and the biggest social media stars in the world fighting guys like Tyron Woodley and all eyeballs on Conor McGregor. That will be seen. What's interesting to me is that we are a niche, but now the niche can actually support careers and businesses outside of just the very, very few world champions and gym owners. The only way to really make a living was win ADCC or win a lot of tournaments or maybe go to the UFC. You retire, sometimes broke and penniless, and then you open up an academy in your community and you get 300, 400, 500 students, and you make a living.
Or you go to fight in Japan. That used to be the old one. Fight in Japan for the big bucks. Fight Takada, the guy that would take a fall against anyone. But back in the day, those were the ways, right? But I think now times are changing, and I think the issue is it's a cultural shift in what's going on with jiu-jitsu. A lot of the people that were doing what you were saying, winning world championships, winning ADCC, maybe fighting Valley Tudo, those are now the school owners and sort of the mentors for the new generation. And some of them expanded beyond that. Some of them didn't. So it's still a little bit of an education process for the new up and comers to sort of understand how they can, have a career in grappling without just following that participation or performance-based results. You look at guys like, Keenan Cornelius, a guy that, regarded as the greatest gi competitor of our generation, never won a world championship. Now, I'm not saying that as a knock to him because, there was a controversial, like he's always there. He's always doing amazing. But if he would have only stuck to winning results and excluded all of his social media that he put into building his brand, he would be nowhere. You know what I mean? So people have to look at that from another perspective. They have to, like I said with the Mendes brothers, they need to embrace what guys like Keenan are doing and saying, well, what is he doing that's so different? Like, what is he post? How is his social media better than mine? What is it like? What is it about? It's not because he's smiling better or wearing a cooler gi. It's about what product he's giving to his fans, how he's engaging with them, what he's feeding them. I look at his engagement and what he's servicing his fans, and I look at some other world championships. It's night and day. Other world champions are sitting there like holding a medal and saying, thank you, and with a motivational quote. That's cool. But he's saying, "Hey guys, you know when you get stuck in worm guard and no, this is what I do." You know what I mean? And that's what people want to know. That's what people want to learn from people. We have to. I think that some of these competitors need to understand that this is no longer, 1999 in Brazil, where the culture was to sort of hold back on giving techniques. You know what I mean? Because that was a thing back in the day. People, like, they would hide techniques, especially if you weren't Brazilian.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not trying to cause an issue.
I don't think you are. When I started training jiu-jitsu in 2009, it was taboo to even go on YouTube and learn technique because it was thought of that anybody who's going on YouTube and sharing technique, nobody legitimate would do that because nobody shared technique at that time. It was something you kept inside your academy. As you're talking about content, I'm thinking about your content. You're putting out incredible content. I'm not just saying that to kiss your ass. I watch it all the time. Your classic match breakdowns, your technique breakdowns. I believe we are in the infancy of the importance of content. Like today, I usually ask my staff at my companies, do you think that content is becoming less important or more important? Of course, the answer is more important. How did you pick up on this so early? Like, how did you start and launch your YouTube channel, your podcast? What was it like in the early days? Because even today, I think we're early, but you were early.
Mm-hmm. I think it just, I think I just realized a long time ago, I just felt this like amazing feeling of just like the power of jiu-jitsu and what it did for me. And I always thought that, looking at the stories of jiu-jitsu, and the history of jiu-jitsu, it was never told. So subconsciously, I used to tape collect. I used to collect all these VHS tapes back in the day and trade and blah, blah, blah. And then I was always like holding them. I always thought in my head, like one day, like there needs to be somebody telling the stories of these events, because there's a lot of amazing stories, like there's just from the trials and tribulations of the athletes to the circumstances surrounding the matches to what happened in the match. I just never saw anyone doing that. I just always felt like no one's doing it. Somebody's got to do it. So I always, it took me a while to sort of build confidence to like do it. Cause I have this weird like little phobia where I always think of like the most strict guy I can think of in jiu-jitsu, like the hardest guy is like Saulo Ribeiro. You know what I mean? Like, so I always think of like anything I do online, I think like Saulo is going to look at me and be like, this is bullshit. So I'm always like, I don't know why. Cause like I've had conversations where he tells me, he's like, you need to do this and you need to do that. And a lot of it's been really good feedback. Like he's like, you're the guy, you need to tell the stories. And once he started giving me positive reinforcement when I saw him, then I was like, oh man, this is the guy that I was almost like afraid of. And he's telling me that I'm the guy that needs to be doing it. So then I was like, oh shit, it's on, so then I was like, okay, so if this guy is who I was kind of afraid of is telling me I need to do this, then I got to do it. You know what I mean? Like my fear has been overcome. So it's a weird story. And that's kind of like the little spark. Sometimes it's that little seed, that little spark that motivates you to do what you want to do, And then I was just like, hey, I'm going to try it. I bought myself a camera. I didn't know anything about lighting. I still don't. I tried my best, and I did a video on ADCC or something a few years ago. And I was like, okay, cool. Then I'll try another one. And then I just started putting out the videos, the old school ones. I started to do little story videos. And then, it's amazing because like, I always thought that the story and the history videos, I always thought that would be cool for like the older generation, but it's surprising because a lot of the younger guys, when I go to tournaments, they pop up and they're like, hey man, that match you did, or that history video you did was amazing. And, stuff like that. So I'm starting to learn now that the history videos sort of transcend, and, my channel, I have like history videos. I have old matches. It's a mishmash of everything. If you're a jiu-jitsu fan, you'll find something there. I did a little story on the Contenders. It was a pro grappling event, back in the day. And, it's just sort of become my thing. I try to, it's tough because I try to constantly, figure out what, and I think that this is like a brand owner perspective. It's like you have to make content or a product that's not just cool for you, but that everyone will enjoy, you know? And I think sometimes brand owners, when I look in any industry, sometimes they'll make shit, you know, they'll create content or they'll do promotions, and like some people just don't understand it. Or sometimes they make stuff and it's just like, it's cool to them, but to no one else. Like some brands, like it's more like Japanese looking, and it's like, well, if you weren't into Japanese MMA, this is not cool. This is just lame. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, so it's hard to find that balance of like what is cool for you and what's cool for the masses. So that's why my channel is a little bit of everything. I put some old matches. I do new match breakdowns. I'll do history videos. If I find, you know, some matches that maybe I know some guy from 10 years ago who's never been on YouTube again, I'll just throw it up. And if he wants me to take it down, I'll take it down. No problem. You know, it's a little mishmash, but that's the beauty of the channel for me, you know, and the more people give me feedback, the more I'm trying to make adjustments to what they want to see and not just what I want to. Because if it was me, I'd just be watching Jacare and Hodger every single day, or guys like Margarita. But I think people are over that now.
Let me just tell you, your video on the Contenders is a must watch for everybody in jiu-jitsu.
Thank you.
I did not know about that. And I consider myself somebody who is scouring the internet on a nightly basis for every obscure jiu-jitsu match video thing that you could look at. And I'd never heard of that. And the number of legends who were represented in that event is just wild. Do you remember it? Do you remember watching it, the Contenders?
Yeah, you know, I got the VHS tape, and before we get to that, I just want to explain why that was so important to me and why I did that. Is because here in Canada, we never had access to black belts till around 99. So if you were a blue belt in Canada, you were like a god. You were just like, you know, you were, if we saw you, you know, from 93 to like 99, you were like, you were the man. Like if you had a purple belt, whoa, you might as well have been a black belt. So a lot of our learning in Canada was done through seminars, magazines, books, VHS. It was not a lot of, you know, and then once in a while you heard about some guy in an hour away from you that went to Brazil for a week, and then you came back and you're just like in awe. You're like, what? You know what I mean? So a lot of what we did to learn was watching early UFCs, early events, extreme fighting. That's where we learned technique, because we had no access to real jiu-jitsu back then. There was none. Because what Brazilians want to come to cold-ass Canada? They didn't come here. They all went to California. They went to Miami. So we had to learn with whatever material we could get. So we watched everything. UFC, World Combat, Pancrase. First time I saw knee bars, I was like, boss, who's this Bass Rutten guy doing a leg? Whoa, you could do that from, you know what I mean? Like that blew my mind, you know? So we literally had to learn with everything. So our fascination with grappling and jiu-jitsu was through the UFC and stuff like that. And when the Contenders came out, I remember it because I saw an ad in like a magazine, I think at the time. I never got to watch the pay-per-view because I couldn't afford it and I couldn't get my parents to do it. But I got the VHS tape because we taped, you know, that was the thing. Like I remember, you know, trading tapes with guys like Kenny Florian back in the day. You know, I got a funny story about that later on. But that's what we used to do because that was our currency. It was like, and everyone at that time, we used to go to forums and be like, man, did you guys catch, you know, this guy? And then, oh, I'll send you the tape. What do you got? And then you would have to exchange, right? So it'd be like, you would give each other your list. Oh, here's my list. Okay, I want this. I'll trade you for this. It was like almost like a baseball card trading, right?
Yeah.
So we used to trade tapes to learn. And, you know, that event at that time, nothing was like that. There was no other, you know, cross grappling, you know, events. The only thing that had ever happened before that was like the Milo Savage match or Antonio Inoki versus Muhammad Ali, like stuff like that. But like, it was so like, you know, one and done, or like the old Helio Gracie, Carlson Gracie grappling matches, or, you know, jiu-jitsu matches in Brazil. So when that came out, it was like, what? Like you know, MMA fighters against grapplers, and, you know, they weren't even calling them grapplers. They were calling them the martial artists in the video, you know? And yeah, it was cool, you know? And I saw, you know, at that time, like guys like Frank Shamrock and Matt Hume, they were doing toe holds. That was the first time I saw toe holds. I was like, what the hell is that? You know what I mean? So it was more about my passion for learning the art and the in jiu-jitsu that kind of led me to kind of also looking at the history of it all play out. You know what I mean? Because in reality, UFC was in 93. The first world championships of jiu-jitsu was 96. So by the time the first worlds happened, I kind of knew what jiu-jitsu kind of was, but I didn't get the VHS tape till 97. And then 97, I got like 4 other ones. I was like, what the hell is this? I thought it was going to be like Brazilian Vale Tudo. I thought that's what jiu-jitsu was. I thought that, because I had no idea, you know what I mean? And then we watched the tapes, and then the Contenders came out. And then a year after the Contenders was the first ADCC. And like I said in the video, the Brazilian magazines were actually calling the Contenders, or they were calling ADCC the Contenders of the Middle East. That was the first nickname that it had, because the Contenders was the first ever pro grappling show. They had other shows in California, like the Joe Moreira Black Belt Challenge. It was like a super fight show. They had some other ones, but nothing that really nothing that was on television or pay-per-view. It was all just like local, at a gym and stuff like that. So that was a really big deal. It was the first grappling pay-per-view. Nobody saw it, maybe 1,500 people around the entire world saw it, compared to thousands that watch, Flow Grappling Weekly. But it was cool. It was historical. And I think it sparked a little fire and a little interest for the ADCC. And, one thing led to another. And now you got the biggest submission fighting championship in the world, the Abu Dhabi Combat Club. So, yeah.
What just an amazing story. And there is a lot of history in our sport, modern history, of how we got to where we are now. And like I mentioned before, I think we're just in the infancy of the crossover between content, social media, and these, our incredible sport.
Absolutely.
It's just so great. Yeah, let me endorse you one more time. I really can't say enough that your video on the Contenders is a must watch.
Thank you.
I was surprised how prevalent the use of heel hooks, foot locks, and knee bars were at that early event. It's almost like it was at the beginning, and then it was forgotten about for a long time, and now, of course, it's come back.
Yeah, I think because back then, it's like Danner said, like, you can't pass the guy's guard, screw it, I'll go for a leg lock. Like when I first started training jiu-jitsu and grappling, we learned the heel hook, and that was always my, man, this guy is super strong. I can't do shit to him. I'm just going to heel hook him. So that was my thing. But we didn't even know that was like illegal in like the IBJJF and stuff. We had no idea. We were just literally copying whatever resources we could find. So if it worked, it worked. That's what we did. So I think what was going on there is, a lot of the Brazilians or the, some of those submission guys were just, they couldn't sweep the wrestlers. Only one guy swept, maybe 2. I think there was only 2 actual sweeps. They couldn't certainly couldn't take down the wrestlers. So they couldn't sweep them. And there was back taking was not a real big thing at that time in grappling until Marcelo Garcia kind of brought it back. Back taking was bigger in MMA because it was takedown, pass the legs, mount, punch, punch, punch. He reverses, take the back, punch, 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 rear naked choke. That was the formula. But back taking and grappling in no-gi certainly wasn't as big. People were still getting caught in arm bars from the guard or triangles, in events like Naga and Grappler's Quest. So when we started to see these high-level wrestlers who were starting to learn a little bit of defend the armbar and the triangle, they weren't getting swept and they weren't getting the backs taken. So, that's when they had to start looking at lower body submissions for a way to, tap these guys out. And, you saw what happened. A couple guys got submitted, toe hold, heel hook, and so forth. But it was a cool event. I'm hoping for the big Contenders revival, but I don't think we're going to see it.
I'm so impressed with the new crop of grapplers who are coming up. Mickey Galvo, the Tolo brothers, Nicky Ryan, Gordon Ryan, of course, Craig Jones, Andrew Wilty. Yeah. These guys are like taking the jiu-jitsu and doing totally new things with it. It's almost unrecognizable from the Contenders video. It's like you can see it's kind of the same sport, but it's really not the same sport.
Yeah.
Are you surprised at this evolution? How quick it's been?
Not how quick it's been, because I've been kind of following it since you know, we see the trends, right? Like we see how the techniques have kind of evolved because I've been there studying and kind of analyzing and, you know, taking in how things have trended and evolved the whole time. It's not been a quick thing for me, but it's so cool to see how good the new generation is at everything now. You know, before it was much like the UFC where, you know, we used to have specialists like, you know, jiu-jitsu specialists, wrestling specialists, kickboxing specialists. And with jiu-jitsu, we were starting to see that, you know, like guys like Rodolfo, you know, takedown guard passing specialists, you know what I mean? Yeah, he knew how to Berimbolo, but was he awesome at it? Maybe not in the highest level black belt, you know. And then there was other guys, you know, they all have different specialties. But now guys like Mika Galvão, guys like Wiltsy, guys like Roberto, they can take you down, they can pull guard and sweep you, they can take your back, they can leg lock you, they could submit you from guard, they could do anything, they could sweep you, they could do it all. So that goes with the exploration, evolution, and expansion of the techniques. And it's no coincidence that it's happening during the era, as you said, of the content of social media, of YouTube. And now that that's so easily accessible, you know, it's not like it was before, like where you had to get Marcelo Garcia's VHS tape, try to remember it for class to do the techniques. Or, you know, if you're lucky, you lived in a dojo that had a TV VCR and you can press play and pause or whatever. Now you literally just have your cell phone and say, hey, let me just try this new, you know, lapel guard sweep that Keenan just saw. All right, cool. Oh man, that looks cool. Let me drill it 25 more times. All right, done. You know, on to tomorrow. So it's the access to the content. It's the access to information that's really helped us evolve. And a lot of these guys get so much better. But also, I think, you know, kind of, I hinted on it before. I think back in the day, the first people that came to America from Brazil were very reservative on what techniques they showed. And it was kind of against their own personal interest to really show you all the cool stuff. You know, I remember the classic story of Mark Lehman going to the Gracie Academy. And this is not to knock anyone specifically, but I remember his story was, you know, he was training there, you know, Hoyce and Hicks and all. And then all of a sudden, some of these guys started leaving. And then he was just training with the Suns or whatever. And then he saw the Pan Ams. And then he was like, what's that? Like, what's that style of jiu-jitsu? Like, and then he would ask, and they were like, oh, we don't do that style. We do this style. And then it was like, so I think now a lot of the black belts, it's to their interest, not against their interest to hold back. Also because it came from a culture of, you know, jiu-jitsu versus Vale Tudo, jiu-jitsu versus shootbox. You know, I used to train in an academy in Atlanta where in Alliance and Master Jiu-Jitsu, where they were rivals with Obaki Gym. And Obaki was Obaki Gym was a gym where it was a lot of like meathead, like wrestlers, professional wrestlers, shoot fighters that wanted to fight MMA at the time. So holding the secrets of jiu-jitsu was kind of to our best interest. And sometimes that got held even amongst the jiu-jitsu people, but now it's against it because now the head guys are learning that, hey, if I make the most successful team in jiu-jitsu, that's going to make all my affiliates money. That's going to make me more money. That's going to make my association more money and so forth. So there's a huge reciprocal effect there. So now that the finances are in line and there's more financial compensation and more benefits, a lot of these people have opened up their access to their technical knowledge. They've, you know, and as a result, a lot of these gyms are just getting way better technically. And, you know, the level just keeps going up and up and up. Because remember, in like 1999 and 2000, you know how we knew new techniques were happening? It was like a blog from Scotty on the mat saying like, hey, gringos, if you guys don't get your half guard any better, you guys are going to be screwed when you come to the Mundials in Brazil. So we were like, oh shit, what's half guard? Like, you know, if you didn't know it, you were done. And there was no YouTube, you know, there was nothing like that. So you had no access. So you had to like scour every VHS tape you could, try to find the technique and say, oh, okay, I think that's half guard. Okay, cool. So yeah, things have just expanded, you know, with the technical evolution, the technology evolution. So as the techniques have evolved as well.
It's beautiful that technology could influence technique in such an incredible way. It's almost like, it just mirrors the rest of the world on technical evolution. The more communication you have, the more transparency, openness, the whole sport gets lifted up together. I give, the Marcelo Garcia, who had his academy, he was like an early adopter using technology, putting it out there, MG in Action.
Yep.
John Donahar, of course, with BJJ Fanatics and Gordon. Kit Dale was super early on this with his online classes. Mm-hmm. All the guys that embraced it early built a lot of momentum. Keenan with his courses to monetize their content, monetize their brand, and really be able to make a living off of this sport. And now you see so many people coming down the pipe and being able to monetize their content. And what I always try to tell young people is it's not too late. I mean, it is. I think we're really early, and content is only going to become more important. Mm-hmm. So it's
Sorry, and I was going to say it's like, and what I feel is that some of these athletes don't know how to do it, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's so important. And it's what I alluded to earlier. It's like if you have 55,000 Instagram fans and you're not directing them to some funnel or to some subscription, those are your fans. If they're following you, they like you. So what you need to start doing is to getting them to start going to a website or going to a funnel or, getting their email addresses or for the purpose of servicing them, but also for you to make money because you deserve it, If you're a world champion and you're not doing anything like that and you're just waiting, to get paid by a sponsor, that's kind of lazy. You know what I mean? Like be your own sponsor. Like Tim Spriggs says it, build your brand, sponsor yourself, make your own merchandise, make your own cool merchandise. Bushesha, another guy, made his own merchandise. Bushesha has the benefit of, being this big ass, cool surfer, jiu-jitsu guy. And he has all the accolades. He doesn't have to speak as much, but he's pretty savvy when it comes to branding, and he works with Ruka and so forth. He started selling merchandise. He has a new t-shirt that comes out every year. So he's not going all in, but he's doing just enough to kind of, make some money off it. And I think people need to start looking at guys like that. What is he doing about his, oh man, Bushesha had his own logo like years ago. You know what I mean? Oh, he was selling his own t-shirt years ago. You got to start doing that. If you have fans, you shouldn't have shame in selling to them. You know what I mean? Because if you're not going to do it, the guy that maybe beats you is going to do it, and he's going to make money off him. So you should be doing it too. You know what I mean? It's not about trying to max out and just sell. And you got to think of that. It's not about that. It's about creating a community. It's about saying, hey, you guys are my family. You guys are my supporters. If you guys can help me purchase my product, it'll keep me going. And if you want more, and you create this rapport with the audience, with the fans, and with your customers, and I think that's the issue is sometimes some of the athletes, I think they're ashamed to do that, or maybe they feel like their instructor is going to kind of look down on them. But you know what I mean? At the end of the day, like, the world championships, they help, your value, but they don't pay the bills. You can't go trade them into your, to the landlord. Like you got to work with that. You got to work with the media. You got to work with flow. You got to work with the media that's out there. You got to build your own media. I put a comment out there the other day. It's like, I see some people saying like, oh, the media this and the media that. It's like, make your own media. You know what I mean? Like follow, have your buddy film you rolling, put it on YouTube, monetize it. People want to see that stuff. Why not? If you just wait for the film crew to come, they ain't coming until you do something cool. So make it cool. Do it yourself, I'm so with you. I lived it. My family, my father's side of the family is a family of entrepreneurs, business owners, starting businesses, talking about business, talking about money, talking about leasing and renting. Mm-hmm. My mother's side of the family, they were from Brooklyn, children of immigrants. Money, business was taboo for them. My grandfather on my mother's side, he had a job. He was a career man. My grandmother worked at a bank. When they came home, it was taboo. Money, it was family when they got home, and when they were at work, they did their work, and they only made enough money to live, and that was it. When my mom met my dad, and she went out to the diner, and they were having a cheeseburger around the diner table, all they were doing was talking about money and business and money and business, and my mom was like put off by it. She's turned off. Mm-hmm. And so I recognize that a lot of people out there, especially in martial arts,
maybe they grew up in a family of teachers or scientists or union workers, and it wasn't so common to talk about the things that you and I are talking about. That's why I think podcasting and the internet in general is so powerful, because maybe you do have that spark of entrepreneurship. Maybe you do have built a following, and you're like, wait a second, I need to live, I need to eat, I need to pay my rent, but I love doing jiu-jitsu. How do I do that? So that is my motivation for this project. Like, you nailed it. I hope if one kid is listening to this and they just won Purple Belt Worlds or something, and they've got 2,500 followers on Instagram, that they know 2,500 followers is enough to actually start to build your own little business around your personal brand. And anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. So I applaud you and appreciate you bringing that up. I'm extremely, extremely grateful. I'm really grateful for your time and all your stories. The content that you've been putting out all these years is so good. And I hope you just keep doing more of it. And I'm a big fan.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your words. I appreciate what you're doing. And I appreciate the fact that you're, it's like you said, you're kind of breaking the taboo talking about business in jiu-jitsu, because in reality, a lot of these guys out there, they don't know how to run a gym. They don't know how to brand themselves. They don't know how to sell. They still think it's this weird thing, and it's not. It's like any other business out there. A dentist, goes to school to get a degree to practice dentistry, and spends all that time. You're a jiu-jitsu artist, martial artist, you're a jiu-jitsu athlete competitor. You're spending all these years. You got to make some money off it, and there's no shame in doing it. It's not that you're selling your soul to Satan or something. It's like you're selling the product that people want, but it's just, we have to break the taboo of giving it to them, and just learning how to do it is sometimes awkward, and who to ask. There's no real gurus out there. I'm certainly not one, but I'm starting to see it more and more now, because I have more athletes, I have more coaches, I have more managers coming to me saying, hey, you work with Flo. What do you guys think about this? Or what do you guys do that? So I'm trying to educate them as best I can. But I think, podcasts like yours is so valuable for them. So congratulations, everything you're doing, and can't wait for the book to come out.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to begin writing it in a few weeks. My first book that I wrote, which was about my first 10 years in business, took me about a year and a half. So the book's not going to be out for quite some time, but this podcast in the meantime will hopefully hold everybody over. Riccardo, hang around for a second. I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.